I know we can all relate to this, where the piles just start adding up. The things in our home start to overwhelm us and we don't really know what to do with them. We want to move forward, we just don't know how. And today we're gonna look at several different homes. I got some really great videos to show you about how people have overcome clutter. And what I want us to take away from this is that no matter what your reason for where you are right now is, because all of us are gonna have a different reason why our homes are overwhelming and cluttered. But I want you to set those reasons to the side, because last year I read a book that was called Everything is Figure Outable. And one of the big points that I took away from it was that a lot of us sit in our reasons and make them our excuses not to do things. We all have things that are extremely difficult in life, and I'm not taking away from any of that. But what I am saying is that for many years, I made myself more miserable than I needed to be because I lived in the excuses as opposed to acknowledging where I was coming from and building a better future. Those are all the things that we're going to talk about today. So let's jump into the first video. Oof. Thanks for joining us down here. We're going to start with my favorite quote before we watch the first video, and that is, we make ourselves miserable or you make ourselves strong. The amount of work is the same. Starting with this idea in mind, I want you to stop today going back to the excuses you're making on why you have so much clutter and start seeing that motivation follows action, not the other way around. Let's go to this first video because I absolutely love her message here.
This is my house, and I already know what you're thinking. How could anyone let it get to this point? And up until recently, I probably wouldn't have known how to answer you. But the reality is that this is the impact of being disabled and mentally ill, and not being able to maintain a space that I love. Have I ever? I'm married now, but this feels like an extension of my college dorm room. We've been here 4 years, but it doesn't feel like a home. So we're starting a series, I guess.
And I really appreciate her sharing this story with us of her life, but it goes back to we learn to live in our clutter. That's one of the biggest problems many of us have, myself included, because it gets comfortable. We just get used to it, right? And so she was talking in this video about how she had lived in this house for 4 years, her and her husband, and you can tell they hadn't done much. They had some paint on the walls and every closet was completely stuffed full of things. I think a lot of us at some point in our lives could probably relate to how she was feeling. That feeling that we know we're not where we want to be, but we don't know how to get there. And so it's almost that saying of, start before you're ready. You're never going to feel ready to change. But luckily that doesn't matter. You don't need to feel ready, and you don't need to have all the tools in order to get started on something like decluttering. You literally just have to start. I love how she was so open about starting this process of change, that it was going to be uncomfortable, because it will be uncomfortable. Anytime that we have to change the way we are acting, our brains put up these big red flags, right? That this is going to be weird and I don't know if this is all going to work out, so maybe we shouldn't start it at all. And yet we move past that. And when we do, we can acknowledge, like she has, with no shame and no guilt about where she is right now. She can just plainly acknowledge that this is where I'm starting. This is my starting point, but I'm moving forward. I think that I, for many years, lived in this state of shame because I knew I was out of control when it came to shopping, and I knew that I was out of control when it came to my clutter, and yet I didn't have any solutions for it. And sitting in that made me feel very guilty and full of shame, and I didn't want to share it with anybody. But the second that I told myself that I'm going to change, I made a million mistakes, guys, all the mistakes in all the books, but that didn't matter because I acknowledged where I was. And so when you say it out loud, where you are, you acknowledge where you are, it's like it takes the power away from the shame. We're gonna get ready to watch one of my favorite videos, but before we do, I wanted to thank today's sponsor, which is June's Journey. I have been playing this game for a little while now, and what I realized was that this 1920s mystery style game has been great for my brain. So instead of scrolling all night where I end the night with anxiety, I play this game, and honestly, it's so much fun because you are solving mysteries. The main character is June Parker, and you get to play this super clever, intelligent woman who on her own is solving all of these crimes and figuring out plot twists. Every week they come out with a brand new chapter to the game and you can create your own little world. While you're solving mysteries, you're also using your working memory. So you're finding clues in this game, and then you're having to remember where those clues were and finding new clues, which is something that as somebody with ADHD, I can honestly say is not my strength. And this game I feel like is a great fun way of adding that into my everyday. So if you're with me and you want to try something a little bit different, this game, Jude's Journey, will send you on a thrilling journey of betrayal, love, and family drama. Go ahead and click on the link in the description, or you can click on the QR code and go have some fun. And so now let's go watch one of my favorite videos. All right, I absolutely love this woman for sharing this video with us because clutter is a silent stressor. And what you'll see in the video we're getting ready to watch is exactly how clutter becomes a stress because we hide it away from ourselves. But when we finally get the chance to look at it all, it is an incredible wake-up call to where we are. So let's watch this next video and you can tell me what you think.
Okay guys, you should probably see our garage. This is pretty embarrassing. But yeah, and this is Christmas tree that we still didn't put in our attic. Ooh.
Literally, you can hear in her voice the overwhelm as she's walking into her garage. And I think for a lot of us, what I felt when I first saw this video was how relatable is this? I have been here and felt this when I walked into the shed, when I walked into my attic, and that feeling of what in the world has happened in here? And how am I even going to begin to start organizing and decluttering this room? For most of my adult life, I feel like I lived in where she is. And the idea that clutter is a silent stressor. We constantly feel it, but if we're not looking at it, acknowledging it all the time, then we can put it in the back of our minds, right? Out of sight, out of mind. And we kind of try to compartmentalize our clutter. And yet we know at one point it's all going to explode like it did for her, and you're going to open the door and you're going to realize that you face what has happened in these different spaces. I used to be, I could have been diagnosed clinical shopaholic because I used shopping as a coping mechanism for all of my feelings, right? Happy, sad, irritated. I felt like I needed a pat on the back. Anything in between, I felt like I needed to go shopping. But the other part of that was that not only did I just go shopping, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I felt like every time I left somewhere, I had to buy something. And this was on my mind yesterday. I went into like a cute pharmacy, not your regular CVS, but like one of the cute ones we have in our area. And they had a bunch of like fun tchotchkes and all this like cutesy stuff. And I was walking around with my mom and my grandma, and I started thinking about how before I started my minimalist journey, if I had walked into this store, I would immediately thought, oh, let me find something. Like, this is such a cute store. This is such a treat. Let me find something. And now my brain acknowledges I still have those feelings. But then after that initial feeling, I can say, oh, no, I don't need anything. I didn't come in this store for me anyway. We came in for my grandma and my mom. So I don't need to find something. I want to find something. And just the recognition of that feeling is so helpful for me, because it's not that I don't buy things anymore, because I do, but it's like that extra 30 seconds I need to realize I'm going back to my old ways where I feel like I need something because I walked into this door and not because I actually could use it in my life. So yes, I walked out with absolutely nothing and felt perfectly fine. And yeah, there were some cute things in there, but I didn't need them. And I knew that and could acknowledge that. And that has helped me to stop going back to the silent clutter. I didn't know I even had this much stuff because I was buying it without any thinking process whatsoever. If you're enjoying this video, then please come join us here on Minimal Ease. And of course, if you're decluttering and organizing with us, throw a heart emoji down below. It absolutely makes my day. But we're gonna start on the next third video, and it's all about how we can forget what cleanliness, what an uncluttered environment feels like when we live in clutter for so long. And really, it's not until you walk into somebody else's house that may be well organized and no clutter, or you walk into somebody who's really extreme, that you notice and feel that there is a difference. So I want you to think about that as we're watching this next one.
Let me just start off this video by saying this brave solo parent decided to reach out and ask for help. Which means A, they realize that things have gotten out of hand, and B, they realize that they can't do it on their own. So here I am for 3.5 hours to help declutter, clean. Basically, I have a free-for-all to do what I would like. I start by sorting piles. So I put clothes on one end, toys in a pile, as well as hardware, a pile of recycling and garbage.
All right, so I love this video because obviously this isn't, here, come on over here. This isn't the owner of this home. This is a woman who was asked to come in to help declutter and organize, which to me is an amazing sign that you realize that things have gotten out of hand and maybe you don't have the skill or time or energy to deal with them. But what I did notice is that it goes back to that idea of when you have like a brand new baby, newborn, and they don't have object permanence. And so if you're the caretaker, you walk out of the room, they actually think you're gone and that you're never coming back. And so that causes anxiety, right? We can do that with our homes when we forget what it feels like to have a clutter-free, a clean environment. And we don't realize how much anxiety we're adding to our lives until we get to a like blow up point, right? And I can say this because this has been me. I would get to a point where, you know, on that Saturday, the whole week has gone by, I've done nothing. And then I'm just like, like we're not doing anything today. We're all having to chip in. Everybody's going to have to do something because this is insanity. And finally, it's like that day, it just hits you. Oh, this is insane. I've got to do something about this. And that can take a lot longer for other people than it did for me. But for me, it took about a week of doing absolutely nothing. And what that taught me is that we get in this cycle of buying things and keeping things and then trying to like hide our things away, right? And so we don't have to acknowledge them when we get home with all these bags and boxes. But we're just creating more of a problem when we don't realize how cluttered our environment really is on a day-to-day basis because we're putting up blinders and we're forgetting about it as long as we can until that anxiety boils over and then it spills everywhere and becomes absolute chaos, right? So let me know if you've ever felt like that before. And yeah, I'm not perfect. I still get to these points every once in a while and I'll just get really overwhelmed. You know, if there's a lot of sickness going on in our house or we've had a really bad week, things happen, but we have to take down those blinders of where we're at and look ourselves in the mirror and say, this is really where my home is. How can I make it better? I'm done making excuses, right? And I'm ready to move forward and start a schedule or start doing a little bit every night so that I don't get to this point where on a Saturday, I'm blowing up at my entire family about how bad the house looks. Okay, this has been a wake-up call a bit for me because it's great to remember where we came from if you have been decluttering with me for a while. And it's also amazing to just acknowledge that you have room to grow because I think I have room to grow. All of us have room to grow, right? None of us are living an absolute perfect life. But these videos have really helped me to acknowledge that we are all in different places of our lives. We all have different reasons for where we are in our homes. But the second we acknowledge that we're miserable and we're ready to change, amazing things can happen for us. This last one, I want you to think about that clutter keeps us stuck in a cycle. So you'll see in this video a young family and they're comparing how they grew up, their family home to their own home. So let's watch it real quick and we'll talk about it. So this clutter journey that you saw this person on, I thought was fantastic. It came from, their parents' home, which they felt was very cluttered and overwhelming and uncomfortable for them, to their own home where they realized that I needed a change. I wasn't going to live in the experience I had before and make excuses for where I am now. I'm going to change my action so that I am comfortable in my home. And that's a beautiful thing about growing up. Once you are older and you have the capacity to create your own space, you have the ability to add or take away to that space. And that goes back to the idea that for so long, I thought I couldn't do a whole lot about my home because I lived with other people. But those were excuses I made for not having semi-uncomfortable situations about our clutter and bringing things up and acknowledging what was going on and living in a place where it was just comfortable to stay as opposed to having to make big sweeping changes. And luckily, not immediately, but over time, my husband and daughter both came along with the idea that we do like to live with less. We like to live in a home that's very easy to clean up and less visual clutter because all of us basically have ADHD. And so when we have a lot of visual clutter in our house, all of us are a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And so we had to stop our own cycle of clutter and adding and realize that we did need to change, and that change was uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, now that we're where we are now, we are so much happier. And I'm really hoping that these ideas that I'm sharing with my daughter may not be carried on immediately, but over time, I hope that she can realize how powerful it is to live in a home that you feel very at peace in, that feels inviting, and how much anxiety it does bring us when we have a ton of clutter compared to when we feel in control of the things we have and we're able to process and make good choices. But I totally get it. The things that we learn from our past very often carry it into our future, whether we like it or not. So breaking a cycle of clutter or breaking a cycle of hoarding is extremely hard to do. And it is something that you do have to pay a lot more attention to if you come from a cycle of clutter. But it certainly isn't something that you cannot break and change when you are ready to take those excuses that we all make, right, of why I am a cluttered person, and start getting the help that you need in order to overcome that. All right, friends, I hope this was a bit inspiring because these videos really inspired me. I know a lot of us can probably relate to some of these videos. I have had a home that was very cluttered. I have been extremely overwhelmed in my home, wanting to absolutely run away if possible. And so I think that's where I can say, no, I'm not perfect, but I can acknowledge that this is where I was. And these are the excuses that I had to stop making in order to make real change and to keep that change. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn a little bit more, then click on one of these videos right here. And I wish you guys the very best.